Bob, let's start with Mitt Romney. That was the first of your scoops. Romney was very active in these midterms, the kind of level of activity that you would normally expect to see from someone who is getting ready to run for president in 2016. You have some reporting on that. Go.
So I called around Romney world, and I just tried to get a sense of where was he on election night, what was he up to, and I just kept hearing all these interesting little stories. He was at Ron Kaufman's house, he was watching the returns, and he wasn't just relaxing. He had a whole list compiled by his staff about who was running where, their cell numbers, their home numbers. I mean, Romney was acting like a candidate, making 80 calls to all the candidates he endorsed, and then his staff was keeping these Microsoft Excel documents going about who won, who lost, and at the same time keeping track of Hillary Clinton. I mean, this is a machine guy who's keeping track of everything, even if he's not running.
We know he is a big data analytics guy. Let's talk about a little bit of that data they've been touting. I believe you report in this piece that two-thirds of Romney's candidates won, while only one-third of Hillary Clinton's candidates won. How excited are the Romney people about that stat?
They're super excited, and it's really the people around Romney who are using it to make the argument to Romney that he should jump in and to make the case to donors. And the thing I keep hearing from Romney world is, look, he's not trying to run right now, but if Jeb doesn't run and Christie stumbles, they think Romney still could get in.
You're a great student of the Republican Party, Bob. He made 76 endorsements in these midterms, which is a really large number. Is, at this point, Mitt Romney the most valuable endorsement that a candidate could have in the midterms?
He is. There's not an incumbent president or a former president who's really out there on the trail. And so you have a former nominee who, because of the Mitt documentary on Netflix, because of the way he's really recuperated since 2012, he brings you political capital with a variety of camps within the party that I think is probably more potent than anyone else on the stage.
Do you have a sense, you mentioned the fact that with the same thing that Mark and I have thought for a long time, which is that if Jeb Bush decided to run, Romney would likely not run. Do you think that the same holds true for Chris Christie in Romney's mind, or would that leave the door open for Romney?
I don't think Chris Christie's decision is weighing on Mitt Romney. It's really Bush world. Romney thinks his donor base overlaps with Bush. And I think privately there's a lot of concern about Christie. Can he recover from Bridgegate? Can he get his traction with the donors he thought were in his pocket in late 2013?
But do you have a sense? I mean, I know you know Mitt Romney pretty well. I mean, we've sensed that there's a reluctance there. It's like you hear, that it's a gating function with him with Bush. If Bush runs, he's definitely not going to run. Do you think he wants Bush to run and doesn't want to even have it be an option for him? Or is there some part of him that's kind of hoping Bush doesn't run and that he can throw himself into the fray and be a savior?
It's the open question. From what I hear, Romney is not actively encouraging Bush to get in. Romney would be fine, I think, if Jeb runs. But the thing I keep hearing from Romney confidants, people who've known him for decades, is that he is bored by this idea of retirement. He wants to be out on the trail as much as possible. Even if he doesn't run in 2016, he'll probably be on the trail. This is a guy who wants to be in the arena. I'm not thinking he's angling to run, but he wants to be in a position for some kind of draft. In fact, people around Romney constantly talk about Eisenhower. They think, yeah, that's probably the last time there was a draft. They think maybe it could happen again.
All right, let's shift to your Democratic story. You talked to Tad Devine, you talked to Bernie Sanders. Tad Devine says he's going to work for Bernie Sanders if Sanders decides to run. How did that marriage come together?
Sanders and Tad Devine go back decades. Tad Devine was helping Bernie Sanders in his House races in the 90s, helped Sanders in his Senate race in the 2000s. This is a close relationship. They're friends, as well as Sanders being a client for Devine. Devine has also worked on a lot of independent campaigns before. He thinks there's a path for Sanders. I know when Sanders was on your show, he's not a perfect candidate on television, but in the past, Devine has been able to package Sanders in a way that really resonated with a lot of progressives. He thinks he could do it again, and they've been huddling for weeks. I mean, no one knows about these private talks they've been having, serious talks about mapping it out.
I just want to be clear about one thing, Bob. We thought Bernie Sanders was great on our show. He's a great television candidate. But I'm curious about, say a little bit more about what Tad thinks is the path for Bernie Sanders. Tad is not an idealist. I mean, I say that with all due respect. He's a guy who's a pretty hard-eyed realist about these things, knows how to count votes, how to count electoral votes in particular. What does he think is the way that Bernie Sanders could be not just a protest candidate, but a viable candidate in the Democratic primary?
He talked about how Sanders in the past has been one of the best candidates he ever worked with in terms of small dollar donations. So Devine is thinking about how do you make that a movement type candidacy, and how do you build a national organization that really capitalizes on Sanders' ability to make news, to perhaps go after Clinton, to sound more progressive than her, and to really cut into Clinton's base by having an organization there. And what Devine is really trying to sell to Sanders is, you may have a splash in Iowa or New Hampshire, but how do you survive for the long haul? How do we build that now?
And as a year your sense, if you talked about this with Tad, is it your sense that he thinks that Sanders is a more viable insurgent candidate than, say, Martin O'Malley or Jim Webb? Or I'm going to leave Elizabeth Warren out of the conversation, but about those other two that are seriously thinking about running?
I think so. And one of the things I kept hearing from Devine, and he said this on the record, is that there's really a convergence of issues that is in Bernie Sanders' favor, with economic populism, with the popularity of Elizabeth Warren, with Hillary Clinton not being perfect with all those on the left. He thinks Sanders can step into that space and really build something. He knows it's going to be tough. He knows Sanders' personality isn't totally inclined to that kind of run, but he thinks he could capture the energy.